I would like to introduce the members of the ESU's Council for Undergraduate Research from the College of Arts and Sciences, Bonnie Green, Olivia Carducci, Jay Hunt, Robert Marmelstein, and Jerry Ross.
Thank you, Eugene. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to see you guys. So we're really excited. As Dr. Galperin said, we're really excited to be here, and I'm Bonnie Green. Among other things, I am the chairwoman of the Council of Undergraduate Research here at ESU in the College of Arts and Sciences. So we know that undergraduate research is one of those transformative experiences that undergraduate students can engage in. Right? It's one of those things that changes the way that students think about themselves, and it prepares them and makes them more marketable for graduate school. It makes them more marketable for getting a job, right? Which are things that we all want. So today we're going to be talking about different types of undergraduate research that have happened right here at ESU. But before we do that, I thought that I would go over what exactly constitutes undergraduate research, because there are some misconceptions out there. First and foremost, and this is the definition from the National CUR, Council for Undergraduate Research. First and foremost, undergraduate research begins as an inquiry or an investigation conducted by students. Right? A student starts with a research question or a problem that they want to be able to solve. And then they have to make an original intellectual or creative contribution to the discipline. They have to do something in a way that nobody else has done before. So this isn't just like taking a laboratory science class where you're doing a canned experiment or doing a replication of a study that's been previously published. You need to be doing something, contributing something new to the field. Undergraduate research takes many forms, and today we're going to actually be talking about all of those different types of forms. Jay Hunt, professor from marine biology, is going to talk about course-embedded undergraduate research. And just to give you a brief example right now, so every single psychology major has to take Psych 202, it's experimental psychology. And during this class, they participate in a major undergraduate research experience. They identify a research hypothesis, look into the literature, design a research study, collect the data, analyze the data, and actually present it at the Psychology Research Forum at the end of the year, or the end of the semester, a full undergraduate embedded research experience. Course-embedded research experience. Robert Marmelstein from computer science is going to be talking about internships through, undergraduate research through internships. I actually have supervised several students who have participated in undergraduate research through internships. Two, for example, worked for a company that they're very, very happy with the outcome. They had a problem with one of their measures. People weren't taking what they were saying about their product seriously, and ESU students stepped in and created a measure, validated a measure for them, and now that company is being taken seriously, and they went from just being a company in the Poconos to a company nationwide. And the CEO of the company attributes that to the undergraduate research conducted by ESU students. Livy Carducci in mathematics will be talking about service learning and as an undergraduate form of research. And so, in fact, there are a couple of students here who participated in an undergraduate research experience through service learning last semester with me in measurement and evaluation. We actually created a measure in class, an undergraduate research experience, that is now going to be used by ESU's service learning committee to help to understand the impact. So we had a service learning project on service learning. Outside of the class, though, is normally the way that most people think of undergraduate research. And Jerry Ross, our physics and engineering faculty member, is going to talk about how that works out as well. And there's lots of different ways. Sometimes students do it for independent study. Sometimes students do it for pay, like through a grant. And other times students do it voluntarily. And I see some of my undergraduate research students who are doing those sorts of things right now sitting with us. So, of course, anybody who knows me knows I can't talk about anything without throwing in some data. So here's some data that I have. Dr. Chang, Dr. John Chang, Dr. Irina Kusit, and I, a few semesters ago, collected some data from undergraduate students at ESU in the psychology department. We took an NSF survey of undergraduate research and modified it and administered it to a group of students who participated with us in undergraduate research. There were 37 students, approximately a response rate of 70%, and this is just a portion of that. So for the most part, students are participating in undergraduate research as a senior, but you can see some starting as a sophomore. What's interesting about ESU is that many universities, undergraduate research is kind of saved for the summertime. You don't do it during the school year, you do it in the summertime. But not at ESU, though we have some students participating in the summertime. By and large, they're participating during the school year. One of the things that's interesting is not everybody feels like they're completely and ready to and prepared when they start undergraduate research. They instead, many feel fairly well prepared. Some only feel somewhat prepared. And so that's important, I think, for students to know that you don't just have to make sure that you're completely ready to go. You do have to have some skills, though. If you notice, students are not entering into undergraduate research without any level of preparation. One of the biggest changes we saw from students who participated in undergraduate research is how they thought of themselves for in the future, their aspirations with regard to degrees. Initially, students, before they participated in undergraduate research, were content to leave ESU with a bachelor's degree, and that they would just go out and get a job, right? And some said, well, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to stretch for that master's, right? But after participating in undergraduate research, we see that that completely changes. No students are happy or content just to stay with their bachelor's degree. They want to attain something higher, and with many setting their sights on a PhD. Things change when a student participates in undergraduate research. And two of these, so we looked at the respondents and what they said. 70% or more of the respondents said that this increased a great deal directly because of their involvement with undergraduate research. Obviously, two of them, conducting research skills, their research skills and their ability to formulate a research question makes sense. If you participate in undergraduate research, these kinds of skills will improve. But equally as important and equally in changing was the ability to work independently as well as to collaborate with others. These are the kinds of skills that businesses are looking for, and it helps make sense why undergraduate research increases future opportunities for students. This information is probably most important for faculty who are in the audience today. So why do students participate in undergraduate research? The number one reason is because they do desire hands-on experience. What was interesting is the students did not mention the reason was because they needed it to graduate. They're not participating in undergraduate research because they think they need it. They're participating, like to graduate, they're participating because they desire hands-on experience. But one of the number one reasons that caused a person to say, you know what, I'm going to participate in undergraduate research is because a faculty member encouraged them to. Right? Think about that for a minute. Faculty member went to them, and we have the qualitative data on this, and said, you need to do this, you need to consider this. And in doing so, that faculty member was able to have a major impact on the students. This other topic is important, that students are more likely to participate in undergraduate research when they think that the topic sounds interesting. Now, the truth of the matter is if anybody listened to the topic that I'm actually researching, that my students in my lab are working on, it's boring, right? We are creating and validating measures that are void of social desirability for the purpose of understanding organizational effectiveness and academic achievement. There is nothing particularly exciting about that. It's hard stuff, it's drudgery, it's boring. But we know that students are more likely to participate in undergraduate research if they find the topic interesting. So instead of presenting that, I talk to students about how we're trying to measure and understand diversity in the workplace and understand academic achievement. More interesting, different way of pitching what it is that we're actually doing in the lab. Many students do desire to want to learn about research, but a lot of them thought it would be fun, right? Others desired to do so because of the personal interaction with the faculty member. So a lot of what is going on with undergraduate research goes beyond just people wanting to research. Now, next up, we have 4 more talks. Robert Marmelstein will be talking about undergraduate research experience in his computer science class. Jay Hunt will be talking about course-embedded undergraduate research. Jerry Ross, undergraduate research outside of the classroom. And Olivia Carducci, undergraduate research through service learning. If you're interested in more information, Robert, you can come on up now. If you're interested in more information, you can take a look at our website. ESU's Kerr does have a website, and there's additional information about undergraduate research. But while Robert is getting set up, I do want to talk to the students for a minute. Course-embedded undergraduate research, you don't necessarily have the choice, right? You're either in the class or you're not. That has it. But you do have a choice of getting involved in other forms of undergraduate research. Talk to your advisor. Talk to your faculty members, talk to the professors that you have in your class, and see if you can find ways to actively get involved. We know that it makes a difference in the long run, and 5-10 years from now, you'll have an opportunity to look back at this time and actually feel that the money going to college was worth it. So up now we have Dr. Robert Marmelstein.
I think I need that.
Oh, you need this? You don't have a clippy thing?
No, I need
Okay.
this. All right, great.
There we go.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, or closer to evening. I'm Dr. Robert Marmelstein, a professor with the Computer Science Department. You can see a lot of people in the audience I know, although I'm sure most don't know me. And today I'll be talking, as Bonnie said, today I'll be talking about undergraduate research experience, specifically in computer science and security internships. Okay, so from a computer science perspective, what characterizes undergraduate research? So many times where the task involves a procedure or algorithm which is not fully understood, it's incomplete or even unknown. So when we start at the beginning, we're really not sure exactly how we're going to proceed successfully. We may have an idea, but the problem is very much going to evolve as time goes on. Okay, and the answer is unknown. So again, we have an objective. We think we can get to that objective, but we're not totally sure. So there's always that aspect of uncertainty. And again, complications will arise, especially in computer science. We often find that there are problems within problems that need to be solved. Many of which cannot, and the important thing here is many of these, come up as we go on. They can't all be anticipated by any means at the outset. We often have to try different approaches to get things done. We try one approach, if it works out, that's great, but more often than not, it turns out to be a dead end, and then we have to try something else. And it's a very iterative process, and at times can be frustrating. But then again, the real world is often frustrating too. And in some cases, the final product or result may not match what we wanted to do at the outset. And some of this may be driven by the problems we encounter. Sometimes there are other constraints like the time the students have to devote to the effort, funding, that kind of thing. Let me talk a little bit about the internship characteristics of our program. We do require internships in both the computer science and security degrees in order to graduate. We have a number of students who are double majors. In those cases, they have to do 2 internships, one in computer science, one in computer security. Each internship is nominally 3 credits, which equates to 180 hours of work. During the course of the internship, there have to be regular meetings with the faculty advisor. We prefer to have it in person, but sometimes if the internship is in another state, we have to do it over the phone or through Skype. Almost always there's one on-site visit, that is the faculty member actually going to the facility where the intern is working and meeting with their supervisor and actually seeing what they're doing. The intern has to keep activity logs, which the faculty member reviews incrementally, and the intern also has to do a final report as well. So a lot of work involved, not just the research. A lot of paperwork. These are the basic categories of CPSC internships, external and internal. So external, the intern can be working for a corporation, a government agency, maybe a nonprofit, things like that. And these internships generally do not involve research. They can, but they generally don't. So typical things that an intern can expect to do: software development, certainly, database design, development of a website, evaluation of products. And I have an example of that. So the company may want them to evaluate a product to see if it's suitable for them to use or incorporate in another product. For those of our students who are in computer security, there's cybersecurity assessments or operations like monitoring networks, that kind of thing, guarding against hackers, that kind of thing. There's also faculty-sponsored research, and this can be at ESU or at some other school. Now, these internships typically do involve research under the direct guidance of the faculty member. So the faculty member has a research project, and the student agrees to work for the faculty member on that project. So it's a much more closely supervised internship experience, at least from our perspective. Mainly this does occur at ESU, but we've had instances where students will go work at another school. One notable example of that is Sean, who went to work at Lehigh University. They had a National Science Foundation grant for smart spaces, and he spent his summer doing that. And the faculty member is also both the advisor and the customer in these cases as well. So these are some specific internship examples. These first two worked for me. This was last summer. Well, not last summer, summer of 2015, I should say. And what they were doing is they were helping me on a stock market trading algorithm that I was working on. And they were trying to extract data or scrape data from different social media websites like Yahoo, Twitter, that kind of thing, to support my algorithm. Another intern I supervised, and this was much more recently, this was over the last summer, and this was Robin, and he was working on a very interesting problem. He was working on a natural language speech-to-text translation, and it was in support of a psychological experiment, actually for Bonnie Green. And he was able to successfully do it, but in the process of doing it, he had to try out a lot of different speech-to-text products that were out there, and these were free products, so not all of them worked as advertised, but luckily he was able to find one that did work, and by the end of the summer, Bonnie was extremely happy with what he had come up with. Lindsay Kay. So Lindsay Kay worked for Lockheed Martin during her internship, and she did a number of different things, but the one thing she did that involved research is they wanted to look at this Japanese software for encryption of speech, and they were thinking about using it in their Stu phones, which is basically how people in the military communicate securely, secure voice communication. So she evaluated this Japanese product, and actually she found that it was unsuitable after doing much experimentation because of the way, the way the Japanese voices, they're sufficiently high-pitched that it just didn't translate. It didn't translate the voices correctly. So the last one, and this is Sean M. He's the one who worked at the NSF project at Lehigh University called Smart Spaces, and he developed a web-based GPS tracking system. So basically, people or individuals on web phones that were participating in the project, I'm sorry, I should say smartphones that were participating in the project would be tracked both outside and inside the facility using his app. All right, so those are 4 internship examples, and they're all different, but in some way they're all representative of what ESU students do during their internships. So benefits to the student. In many cases, they're exposed to new cutting-edge technologies, and I think you saw that in some of the examples, especially the speech-to-text example. Forces them to extend their capabilities. So they usually have to do things that, you know, they go outside of their comfort zone. They have to do things that they're not used to doing. They have to work with new technology. And in many cases, they have trouble getting started, and that's where the professor can help them out. But ultimately, they get more confident as a result of their experience. In many cases, when they're evaluating different approaches, different projects, they'll have to come up with the pros and cons of each, so they can bring that back to their supervisor or the professor to decide which way to go. Learn how to think around obstacles. Again, in research, you often run into dead ends, and when you run into dead ends, you can't just stop. You have to think, okay, well, how can I get around this? How can I, you know, is there something else I can do? Is there something else I can try? Enhance critical thinking skills, which is an outgrowth of a lot of these other things. Become more familiar with real-world requirements, obstacles, and constraints. Okay, so again, you know, every project has an obstacle, funding, time, available equipment, that kind of thing. In many cases, especially where they're doing a research project, somebody's going to be writing a scholarly paper, either for a conference or a journal, so they may assist in the preparation of the paper. For the students who were working with me, we ended up writing a paper, and they were co-authors on the paper. That was presented at a conference. Hone teamwork skills, especially, again, if they're working for a company where they're part of a team. Too often as students, they're working on their own, not as part of a team, and in the current workforce environment, teamwork skills are extremely important. Ultimately, it increases confidence in their own abilities, and this can help, obviously, when they go to job interviews or when they're applying to graduate school, if that's what they've decided they want to do. And much like Bonnie, those students that have completed the internship are often more readily, more motivated to go to graduate school at some point. We also have some non-internship research experiences. Probably the most visible one is the annual computer science robotics competition. Every year it's a different task, and the students have to design and build a robot to perform the task. This is essentially an engineering problem, but and while many people think of engineering problems as kind of cut and dry, if it involves something novel where you're doing something other than just applying a formula, there's always some degree of research required for the task. All right, well, I'm not sure it's time to take questions. Yes?
What is the significance of the value of being a co-author? Do you want to get your setup?
Well, for one thing, if you're applying to graduate school, right, then you can, it's an accomplishment you can point to help convince them to admit you, or to put you on an assistantship, for example. If you're working for a company, it's something you can put on your resume. And certainly the experience of writing a paper is probably a little bit more thorough and discerning than maybe writing a paper for just another class, because it's something that's going to be presented to a large body of educated people.
Thank you, Robert.
All right.
And then next up we have Jay Hunt from Marine Science, who will be talking about Course-embedded undergraduate research.
Okay, so I'm Jay Hunt, Director of Marine Science Program here at ESU in the Biology Department of the College of Arts and Science, and I want to talk a little bit about course-embedded research today, an experience that I've had in the last few years. I want to start with this picture before I move off it to show you a couple of quick things. That's Dr. Sean Cornell from Shippensburg, a colleague of mine that works on this field site at a beach in Maryland. And I mentioned him a couple times in the talk. And these little things down here are what are called oyster castles. They're collections of concrete for oysters to settle. And one of their jobs is to help stop the shore from eroding. And I like this picture because you can actually see it. You can see the shore is kind of protected and building out a little bit after only a couple of months of having them in place. So in 2011, I had a chance to go to a national meeting of CUR, and they started talking about course-embedded research as a really neat idea to get students involved. And I wasn't really sure what that meant because I was pretty sure we all do research in science, right? We all have labs, we all have field experiences, and I thought I'm doing course-embedded research. I do research in my class. In fact, in the program, ESU is part of a field station in Wallops, Virginia, where any of us, any students, any faculty can take advantage of these facilities. It's not just the marine scientists, but we send our students down precisely to get the kind of field research that's hard to do in marine science in Stroudsburg. So I have a couple classes down there. I take one class to Roatan each year. These are ESU students doing field research. So what is all this course-embedded stuff? And I thought, this is going to be dull. I'm not going to get anything out of this. And then I realized I don't think they were talking about the same thing. So I started thinking about it, investigating it, and I went to the data, the people that study this, and got grants to look at it. And it turns out there's kind of 5 things for what CUR says is course-embedded research. The first one, these are for science, STEM fields. So first one, use scientific methodologies. Well, we all do that. Everybody's taken a chem lab or a physics lab or bio lab. And we all put all the students in those experiences, right? You have to be in there as part of the class. Projects being iterative and scalable. And I thought, well, yeah, we do the same labs. When I teach the class, we do the labs again. So isn't that repeating things again? But that's not really what they meant. What they meant is, can you do it each time you do the class? Can you actually train the students to collect data and build on what you'd done before? So it was a little different than what I was used to thinking of. The next one got me more. Define questions to which both the students and the professor don't know the answers. And again, my first reaction was a little defensive. My first reaction was, well, I don't know what the data is going to say, but that's not really what it meant. I know what the data should say. I know what the pH effect probably is going to be on a coral before I do the experiment. That's not what this meant. This meant I really had no clue how to approach the problem. It was like a real research question. And then finally, it had to be real world. So instead of doing a field experiment, a research experiment, because you're teaching this class and that's part of this class, turn it on its head and try to say, can the techniques in this class be applied to something somebody actually cares about and get real world data? Well, long story short, in 2012, we have this property, we being that field station, in Greenbackville, Maryland. And after Hurricane Sandy in 2012, we lost between 1 and 8 feet of shoreline overnight. And you can actually see the difference in 1 year close to a building that we have on site. We also lost a lot of the natural oyster beds that were there. And so Dr. Cornell and Ann Armitage from the field station wrote a little grant to put in these oyster castles. And their job is really twofold. Try to get the oysters back and resettle them and try to stop the shore from eroding. And they asked me if I wanted to look at ecology surveys, and I said, all right, this is my chance. I can take my marine ecology class and make it course embedded. So how do you do this? Well, there's less information on how to do it. So my main concern, as you might guess, is how do I change the class, the format of the class, but keep everything I was teaching in it? I don't want to shortchange the students. So I listed all the concepts, all the techniques first, and then I kind of looked at it and said, which one of those, what kind of data do I need to show those? What kind of data do I need to demonstrate it? And then the next question was, can I just give the students the skills they need to get them in the field fast and get the data without them even really understanding yet why? So that's the kind of approach I took, and I found that I reworked everything to do this. To give you one example, we used to run biodiversity indices. So old format is I'd lecture on distribution, abundance patterns, and then different biodiversity indices, and I'd take the students into the field in areas that I knew were better for different diversity indices, so they could practice taking data and do all the different techniques. What I do now is actually start with a discussion of, hey, somebody comes to you and wants to do a survey, what do you do? It doesn't take students long at all to come up with, I need to kind of count the animals and I need to know what they are. Bingo. Then we can start talking about how do you collect them. Because if you're going to collect tiny little microscopic critters between sand grains, that's different than collecting oysters permanently attached to rocks. That's different than fish you can't see that are moving around in a school. And in oceanography, we got another problem. Not only are the animals moving, in plankton's case, they don't swim, but the oceans move. So how do you collect that? And you can talk about buckets and nets and microscopes and all those things that you need before you even get into the theory of why you're doing it. That's the easy part. So you collect the data, then in analyzing it, you build up your understanding so that then you talk about biodiversity. So they're getting everything they would get, except they're getting into the field much faster. So we divided the project into some areas. Students had to do the experimental design. If they didn't have the equipment, they had to build it, present their work, evaluate the others, and the key was they had to evaluate it with those concepts. So they had to evaluate their work and others' work using things like competition or predator-prey relationships or facilitation models in ecology so that I understood they were getting everything. And they liked it. For the most part, their feedback was pretty positive. Once they decided on a technique that needs to be done, we had to go to Home Depot. We had trips to Home Depot to get equipment, build it, put it out in the field, collect the data, bring it back, analyze the data in the field, bring it back into the lab, and present it. And so these are all just, I'm not have you read these because this is really about the process, not about the data, but lots of different techniques, lots of different surveys. These are all student presentations throughout the class of different ways of presenting data. They talk to each other, they talk to me. The thing that I found, which probably shouldn't be that surprising, but was kind of cool anyway, was when they present the data, they're quite a bit more excited to explain it to their peers because they have ownership of it, they figured it out themselves, they get it, and they can relay that, and they get excited about maybe taking the next step. So that's another part of the scalability. We had some decent success. Cornell, myself, and an undergraduate student were invited to talk about the data at a National Estuaries meeting a couple years ago in Washington, D.C., so that was nice for us with some partners at Kutztown Ship and the field station. And after we gave the talk, which was a regular science talk with charts and graphs and all that kind of stuff, I was kind of surprised that I got more questions afterwards when people came up about the course embedded part and how that worked and how we work with undergraduates and how you bring the research in and how do you do it than I did about the data. So I started thinking, well, maybe I'm not the only one that thinks this is something worth doing and something that needs a little attention. I'm running out of time. I'm going to kind of skip this slide because I don't want to leave other people short, but I did have problems. I still have problems. I'm still doing it. I'm still figuring it out. So it's kind of fun for me as a project to kind of see things that I didn't anticipate happening crop up. And I do think students get a lot out of it. My response from them has been pretty good. Several students that have taken the class have gone on to graduate school, and they seem like they're really interested. Many of them kind of interested in analyzing data from that class. And then this slide keeps getting worse and worse. The font keeps getting smaller and smaller because I have to keep adding students to it. But all these people are collaborators now. I had some research students come out of it, some colleagues. We did get an FDR grant, Dr. Hu and I, from ESU for there. But these are all the students that actually went through the project, and anything that gets published out of them, this is going to include their work, at least their data. So that's it. That's it in a nutshell. One example of course-embedded research. Thanks. I'll take questions at the end. You need to switch. You're welcome.
I just want to grab one thing here. Excuse me.
He will be talking about undergraduate research outside of the classroom, which is normally the more standard way that people think about undergraduate research. So, thank you, Jerry.
Undergraduate research outside the classroom. I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of different projects that I've gone through first. But a couple of things I want to talk about. How do you get involved in this? So they've talked about internships and a few other things. A lot of times this starts off as a volunteer type thing. If you're interested, or if you like one of your professors, you're actually interested in them, you can even just ask them, do you have something that I might be able to work on? And you'd be surprised. A lot of times professors would be really excited to maybe work with you. Next, the next step is usually often doing this stuff for credit. That's great. Now you get to do something that could be fun, hopefully, and then you also get credit for it. Moving on from that, then, you know, the pot of gold at the end of this, it's loud, is if you can actually get paid for this stuff. And that does happen through internships or through grants that we professors try to bring in to get you money. Now, for example, this is something I did at my previous institution. I came up with a summer research scholarship for my students. And the way it worked is all the students that started off with me volunteering, they put in their time, and they're like, hey, I want to do this for credit. They started taking credit. And by the third semester they were taking credit for me, over the summer, I found money to pay them to then help me with the research. So not only are they doing research, not only are they getting papers published, they're getting paid to do it. And that's kind of the goal, or that's what you'd really like to see with your research students on a long enough timeline. Now, somebody was asking about the benefits of papers, which I'm going to get back to that, but also just benefits of doing the research in the first place. I'm sure everyone's had students in their classes that are book smart, right? You get the 4.0s, they're doing really great on tests. And people that are hiring, they know those kinds of students. That's great. That is very useful to have your 4.0, to have your 3.9 or whatever it is in your classes. But that is what we classically call book smart, right? What companies want to know, what grad schools want to know, is do you have street smarts? And now, street smarts in terms of university. What does street smarts mean? Can you actually do something? If we don't give you this in a lab, like a physics lab, says step 1, turn on the computer. Step 2, do this. Most anybody can do that if they're just diligent. In research, you're showing that you have the ability to apply what you've learned in new ways. Companies want to see that. Grad schools want to see that. That shows that you're able to apply your knowledge. All right, so in thinking of the things that I wanted to present to you, or things that I wanted to show you, classically I'm an aerospace engineer. Okay, I'm the new physics professor here, the engineering 3-2 coordinator, and I do Hall thruster research. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but I've also done a lot of other research because students came to me and they're interested. Okay, so I'm going to show you the weird examples of research that I've done before. Here's an example. I had a student come to me and they loved my intro physics course, and she said, well, can I put one of these down?
I think you should put the handheld.
Okay, good. Student came to me and said, look, I'm a graphic designer and I'm looking to go for a master's degree of science technology, okay? They're actually looking to get into, not science technology, technological communication. Can you help me out? They said the graphics department says, okay, we can help you make pretty graphics. We don't know crap about science. Go ask a science professor. And all a science professor says, I don't know what I'm going to do with you with communication. I thought this is a great opportunity. I have new labs that I just worked on that I would like to actually make approachable for students. So I hired this student to help me create a physics lab. And now, physics lab at that institution is taught by, or projectile motion is taught by Angry Birds. And she helped me come up with innovative ways to do the same stuff we were doing, but in a way that was more appealing to students. Now, this is a physics professor with a research student who is a graphic designer who's looking for scientific communication. This was perfect. This got her, I can't tell you how many interviews, and by the end of it, actually, we're still working on a third manual that was going to be published. Let's take a next student. This is one of the labs that I emptied out onto all sorts of tables. I had a student that was an education major. I do Hall thruster research. When people come to ask me, hey, I want to do research with you. Okay, let me know when you've had every course that we offer. Then we can start. That's kind of difficult, right? And I had students that were interested in their sophomore year that wanted to do something. I've had Physics 1, I want to do research. Okay, this particular student said, I had Physics 1 and I want to be a teacher. Okay, I want to be a secondary high school teacher. I'm like, great, you are going to have no money and you are going to, well, maybe salary, but what I meant was, when you go to teach, you're going to have no money for experimentation. You have to be good at using the equipment that you have. So we had to create a modern physics lab, and I said, look, I want to create 3 new experiments with this. And this is what we had. We started emptying our shelves. We have equipment, and we have the same thing here, stuff from the 1950s, all of this stuff that's just collecting dust. Let's find creative new uses for this. So we found uses for this that could be used in high school, and we're working on a paper to write this up, to tell other high school teachers, hey, look, if you go clean the dust off some of this stuff, you can do some really neat things. So again, that's an education major that we found a neat research project for. Okay? So moving onward, so getting a little bit more advanced, more towards the physics stuff. So I've moved into the Physics Education Research Forum. This is a website that I have 2 of my students created, flippy.org. You're welcome to go there. And it works with flipped classroom design. I'm not going to go into the details with the website, but what it was is these are 2 students that had been through 2 physics courses and said, look, we're computer scientists. We are really good at web design. Do you have anything you want to create? Why, yes. Yes, I do. And then so the 2 of them worked with me to create this website, and we just spent part of our summer in Sacramento introducing this stuff. So they got a paid vacation to go to Sacramento, and now they're also continuing to mandate this website, and hopefully that's going to be their job here in about a year once they graduate. Should work out pretty well. Here's another example. I'm constantly looking ways in my classroom for things that I would like to change or to use computer programming for. For those of you who haven't had physics, these are examples of 3 vectors, and it turns out that math says I can add vectors in any order and I'll get the same result. So in other words, the 3 vectors, black, yellow, and blue, if I add them in that order, I'm going to get the red line right here. If I add them in this order, I'm going to get the red line. If I order this order, I'm going to get the red line. In all 3 cases, the red line is the exact same length and the exact same size. I could sit there and give you 100 more examples of the same thing and talk to you till I was blue in the face, and most of you would just go, what? So I had a student. I asked, help me out. I need to animate this. I need to show something that I can move these vectors around, and that no matter what combination I do, and if you watch this long enough, this goes through every single permutation of the vectors, and they're still always going to add up to that black line. What I tried to explain for half an hour to students drawing diagrams on the board, I can explain in 10 seconds with a movie that's on this. And this is part of a physics education research project that I'm trying to bring more animation into the classroom. So more on that later. But yet another research project. All right, so then upper class students. Those are some of the students that I had at the sophomore level or sophomore or junior level that maybe weren't physics majors that were looking to get involved in research. And my point in presenting all that to you is if you have a professor that you're interested in, even if it isn't your major, it's worth asking them, do you have something? Is there something that I might be able to work with you? And they might very well be able to help you out. Now within the major, here's an example of a paper that I got published on Hall thruster research that I had a student that wrote this MATLAB code. I put that up there. I don't expect you to be able to read any of that, but the point is that the student was really into coding and he wanted to work with me. So we came up with a Hall thruster design project and we got a paper published. Now that gets back to the question, that's why I wanted to answer, why publish a paper in undergrad? And the reason is the same thing I was talking about before. As an undergraduate student, if you get all these great grades, that's really nice, but on a resume, people want to know that you can actually make something. And making a paper, producing a journal paper, is a pain in the butt. It's a pain in the butt for us, and it's a pain in the butt for the students to do it. But when you get that done, you have a lot of value held into this. This isn't a simple English assignment. This takes months to produce. And for the students that actually get all the way through the research project and get all the way through the publications, I've been published in a journal. I put up with that crap for that long, and I got it done. And I'm telling you, grad schools see the value in that, and so do employers, okay? Writing something like this is hard, as opposed to somebody who goes, English paper, well, I did that last night at 3 a.m., I'm done now. Okay, that's not hard. Okay, everybody's been there. So this really does show the tenacity that you have as a student. And the last one that I wanted to show, the really fun stuff. So if you get far enough into the degree, this is some of the stuff we do here. Here are some power supplies that can easily kill you. Oops. Here are some glass chambers that under vacuum, which I'm about to put them, will explode, can also kill you. If done correctly, you can put together and you make pretty light and you don't die. And this becomes kind of the top level stuff. So these are my research students that have been with me and done some of the smaller projects and worked up to something like this. They got to travel to Princeton with me. They got to create the pretty lights. They got to be paid to go do this sort of stuff. And then hopefully with the Langmuir probe data that we're going to get out of this, we'll get papers published out of that too. So it's kind of an iterative process. Getting into research isn't, I have this great idea, I'm going to go work with my professor, we're going to do this. A lot of times it just starts with something simple, maybe volunteering, maybe asking professors you like, how do I get involved? And whether you intend to go on to grad school or just in the job market, it will be extremely beneficial for you in both cases. Thank you.
Next up is Dr. Olivia Carducci from the Mathematics Department. She has been conducting service learning as a research experience in the context of one of her classes for 8, maybe even 10 years now. So she's going to be talking about undergraduate research through the use of service learning.
All right, so I am going to talk about service learning and undergraduate research. Your first question should be, what is service learning? All right, so service learning is any project that involves students in supporting community needs. It should benefit the academic learning of the student while fulfilling that community need. That's an important part. Students are required to reflect on the relationship between their actions and the community needs, how they've helped the community and what they've learned from it. And we have developing good citizenship as an explicit objective to this project. All right. So of course, then the next question is, why is service learning research? It doesn't have to be. All right. Traditional service learning, you know, sociology has been doing service learning for 100 years. They all come in. They might go, you know, learn about hunger and food insecurity in their class, and then they go help out at the local food bank or soup kitchen or whatever. And that's a wonderful form of service learning, but that's not research, right? But there are a bunch of organizations out there that have needs for information that can be answered using research techniques. And if you identify something like that, then you get to do service learning and you get to do research. And in math, we have a required course for every single one of our majors, secondary ed majors, math and finance majors. Everybody takes this course, Math 425, Introduction to Mathematical Modeling. And as Dr. Green said, we've been doing service learning in there for a long time. So right now, I own it. All right. As long as Dr. Matris is chair, she tells me I will continue to own this course. We've been doing service learning in there since the spring of 2008. These are some of the first few projects we did. I'm not going to talk about all the projects. I am going to put them all up as we go through the slides. But I do want to talk about this one that we did for the ESU Sustainability Commission. At that time, ESU was interested in figuring out their carbon footprint. And they had a great handle on how much carbon they were using to turn on these lights, you know, how much carbon was being emitted from the electricity generated to turn on the lights, to keep this room warm or cool, or whatever they had to do with the physical plant. That was all completely under control, and they didn't need my help with that at all. But they also wanted to know how much carbon was being generated by you and me and everybody else coming back and forth to campus. All right? And they said, can you help me with that? And I said, sure. I said, absolutely, math can do that. No idea how math can do that. Absolutely, math can do that. All right? But literally, I had no idea how math can do that. But I know it can. Math can do anything. All right? So I know it could do that. So I throw it out to my students, and they were very, very quiet. And that's always how it goes. They're very quiet after they get their problem. And they're like, well, what kind of tools do we have? Can we find out where people live? Well, the answer is sort of, right? Institutional research has data on where everybody lives. And we got that zip code data. No names on it. We don't know where you live and where you live. But we know where generally people live. What about what kind of cars they drive? Because that makes a difference, too. Well, you've got a parking pass if you have a car here, and the police know what the make and model of your car is, and we got a hold of that data. We couldn't pair them up. That would have been too easy, right? So you don't get to do that. But we were able to make some estimations of how far people were driving based on the zip codes, some estimations on the miles per gallon they were getting based on the kinds of cars there were, and we came up with an estimate. The thing that was really exciting about this particular project the director of facilities was in charge of carbon footprints, would make sense. And he went to a PASHE conference for all the directors of facilities at the 14 PASHE schools, and they were at their meeting talking, and one other school, Shippensburg, had done this part of it. They're all trying to come up with their carbon footprint, but only one had looked at the commuting problem. They paid a consultant to do it. Not a lot of money. $12,000, $14,000, something in that neighborhood, which on a university is nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. For me, it's a fortune, but for them, it's nothing. We took what could have been a liability and turned it into an asset, an educational project for a bunch of students. Here are some more projects that we did. The Pocono Environmental Education Center has been a tremendous source of projects for me. You'll see two of them on this slide, and I'm going to take a minute to talk about what the class did last spring for the Pocono Environmental Education Center. They came to us and they said, there's a group in Philadelphia that's buying, a conservation group, that's buying undeveloped land up here in the Delaware Valley, in the Delaware River Valley, because they want to preserve the water supply in Philadelphia. So they figure if we take care of the land up here, it'll keep the water flowing down the Delaware River to Philadelphia cleaner. And what we'd like to know is not the market value of the land. We know how much we have to pay for the land. That's a real estate broker's question. We don't care what the market value of the land is. We want to know, if I buy this plot of land, how much money, what's the value of the carbon that's sequestered in the plants? What's the value of the water purification from the root system? What's the value, if it's farmland, what's the value of the crops and all that stuff? So the students came up with a nice spreadsheet. You can input your kind of land that you're working with. You can talk about whether you're going to harvest the timber or not, what kind of trees you have on this property, what kind of crops you might grow. All of this stuff goes into this model, and they came up with a number. He is so happy with this that he's got, so this was last spring. I've got 3 students who are volunteers, right? They're in it for the love of the game, that's all. They're not getting credit, they're not getting money, but they're still working on it. They made a few adjustments over the summer, and we're taking it on the road. We're going to present it to other conservation groups that are interested in this information. So we've got, this kind of thing going on. There were several others there. I'm sure you had time to read them while I was bragging about what my students are doing, because I'm very excited about it. And then the question is, what do these all have in common? Well, first off, they're open-ended questions, right? People say to me, can you tell me this? Yes. The answer is always yes, I can do that. Then, of course, do I want to? Do I want my students doing this? Do I think they're going to have, it's deep enough and big enough that they're going to be able to do a lot of different things? They do it. They have to learn about an unknown area in a significant level of detail. I know more about forests and trees than I ever thought I would know from doing this project, right? You have to learn about something. So they're reading papers, they're looking at government websites, they're doing all of these things, gathering all of this information and putting it together in another form. They get essentially no help from me in terms of what direction to go. Certainly if they ask me a specific question, I'll answer it. If they're talking and they're having trouble expressing themselves, I'll remind them of terms like outlier, that they know certain math terms that will help them talk about this stuff. It's not that I don't butt in. Of course I butt in. I'm a professor, right? But they don't get any, it's not like the problem in your calculus class where it's in the max-min section and it says, find the maximum of this function, and you're supposed to take the derivative and set it equal to 0 to find the critical point and then make sure it's a maximum. You know what to do. They have no idea what to do. No idea. And they interact with the professionals, with the people that are helping us out or the people that are asking us to do the work. They interact with them as equals. And that's valuable as well. All right. The benefits to students sounds like everybody else's benefits slides, right? You've seen this all the whole talk, right? Critical thinking skills are at the top of my list. What's important, what's not important. When they get done, they're all saying, oh my gosh, is this all we did? We had 17 other things we wanted to consider that we didn't have time for. This is terrible. And I keep saying, no, this is wonderful. You guys did a great job. In 6 weeks, you were able to do all of this stuff, and they're going to be blown away. And inevitably, that's what happens. But what the students have is 15 other things they wanted to do and didn't have time to do. That's how excited they are. It's creative. Nobody thinks of math as creative except a mathematician who knows it's creative, right? Teamwork, teamwork, teamwork. My entire class works together on this project. All right. Last semester, I had 13. I've had as many as 21. Fortunately, I've never had more than that. The class is capped at 40. Provost, Bruno, please help me with that. 40 would kill me. All right. Experience presenting technical work. They have to get up and present their work to the client who is not a mathematician. Not a mathematician. Expanded view of mathematics and its application. When students come and ask me what the course is about and I tell them what they've done, I said, you can use math for that? Of course you can. What are you thinking? And they do use their project and their role in it to get jobs. I had one student say, not only was I telling them about it, they asked if they could keep the copy of the paper so that they could study it more thoroughly. So there's definitely huge benefits to students, huge benefits to me as a professor to get to do this with the students. And we are able to offer this opportunity to every single math major. That's it. So thank you. I guess questions now, Bon?
Right now, we're all going to sit on the stage and answer questions. So
Oh, boy.
does anybody have questions for us? Yeah. Questions? Go ahead.
For the first, for the internship,
Come, sit.
is there grant money?
Yeah, good idea.
Or is the critical question or the critical question already planned out before you start the research process? Or are they in the internship and then they come up with this idea like I need to dive in and I need to investigate this
So,
further?
is that a question for me?
Yes.
The internship, okay. So with the internships, again, there's two categories. There's where they go to work for a company or the government. And in that case, they're doing exactly, they're typically getting paid for that. So someone's paying them to be there almost always. Now, for where they're actually working for a professor, typically it is a grant situation. Yeah, typically it is a grant situation where the professor's getting a grant, or like I had an FDR grant at Lehigh. They had a NSF grant, and you've heard other faculty talk about grants as well. So they are getting paid. They're probably not getting paid a lot of money, but to address your other issue about who decides what gets done, almost always they're doing it. The professor has a research project, so they're working for the professor. The professor gives them a piece of the research project that they think that the professor thinks they can do, and it's so when someone's working for you in that capacity, you're usually meeting with them fairly frequently, minimum of once a week and usually more. So.
I can answer that question as well because I've supervised several students in internships on undergraduate research. Typically what happens is a company contacts me. They know my skill set and they say, Bonnie, I need help with this. And do you have a student in mind? And so that's normally the way that it goes about with me. They establish the question ahead of time. And in fact, that's how I went to Robert when I had a problem that I've been working on and was unsuccessful in getting it solved. And I said, Robert, do you have a student who could benefit from an internship? Because I surely can benefit from their skill set. And so it works out that way. But to echo with what Robert says, what's interesting about supervising students in undergraduate research with internships, because I've supervised students just like Robert has that they don't have undergraduate research in their internships. That's much, much easier. With the research piece, I'm meeting with them all of the time. I'm looking at their data, I'm looking at their analyses, and so it's a real bargain for the company that comes in. But the benefit to the student is just huge. Other questions? Go ahead.
I wanted to know the difference between
Who would like to answer that?
Oh, and I think anybody up here could probably answer that. Usually the level of research and the type of stuff that you're working on, is it going to be a big difference? Also, as an undergrad, we know that this is a part of what you are doing on top of your coursework and whatnot. As opposed to in grad school, that's your life when you're doing that. It becomes a different ballgame at that point, but I'll let some of the others chime in too.
So in computer science, we do have a master's degree program, and many of our faculty, including myself, supervise thesis students. So we have two options, a research project and a thesis. They're both fairly complicated. But yes, the sophistication of the research that needs to be done at the graduate level is much higher. And it's much more of an open-ended problem, whereas at the undergraduate level, it's still kind of open-ended, but usually a lot more constraints, and what you expect of the undergraduate is usually a lot more limited. Especially when you're doing a thesis, it has to be thesis level work, and it can go on for years. Literally, I hate to admit it, but I've had students that literally worked on their thesis for 1, 2, even 3 years before they were able to meet the bar for that. And that doesn't happen at the undergraduate level. At the undergraduate level, it's usually maximum a semester.
Another question?
For the people that put research into the class, so the service and biology, about how many students do you have in that class? Is this I think it was a 400 level, was it the same 400 level class for you? And are the students writing projects individually? Are they grouped? Is it all on one specific topic, or do you have subtopics that they're all?
That's a really good question. In fact, Bonnie and I had a conversation about this the other day. When I started out, I kind of let people pick their own projects and pick their own teams. And one of my problems on my slide I didn't get to was that turned out to be problematic, because what ends up happening is the students pick their friends, or they pick people with the same skill set, and you really want somebody who has had a little bit of experimental design background partnering with somebody who's not afraid to have a little construction skill with somebody. So now what I do is I put people into categories. I don't give them the design. They have to come up with it on their own, but I'm saying you need to survey oysters on these oyster castles. You have to do it. And I talk to students in that first week to try to get a sense of where they all are, and I pick people that I think have different skills to put them in the same group. That's somewhat controversial, right? People don't always like being put in a group, and they don't like being put in a group with a stranger. But I find that if they can work out those differences, they have a much better sort of cohesive group, because they've all got their own specialties. The second problem with that was, they all identify their own skill set and say, okay, I'll do the PowerPoint, you do the statistics, that's not what I want. So it's just talking to them a little bit and saying, the reason I'm picking you and putting you together is so that you talk to each other and you all learn how to do things from each other. And if you work with them a little bit, I think that's beneficial, but that's the way I approach it, because otherwise I'm running all over the place. It's difficult to keep, and you mentioned class size, there are typically about 12 or 15 students in these classes. These are field classes at the Wallop Station, and right now, our limit in that class is a pretty hard limit. We can't go more than 22, because the boat only takes 22 people for insurance purposes. So we've got this hard limit of 22. 22 would be murderous in this class, it really would, because so many projects trying to keep, and everybody's doing something different, would be tough. 12 to 15 is a really nice, I get 5 groups, you're kind of flopping back from one group to the next trying to problem solve, and just shuffling around in the same area is stressful for you as a faculty member. If everybody's doing something completely different, that gets exemplified. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, and I have a completely different model.
She's mic'd. She's okay.
I have a completely different model in the modeling class. We start out with group projects, and I have different projects for different groups, and I put them in groups of 3, and they work on those things. And they're realistic but they're not research projects. You know, so the Publishers Clearinghouse has a new prize called $5,000 a week forever, and if you win, you get $5,000 a week for your life, and someone you designate gets $5,000 a week for their lifetime. That's the prize. Or you can take an unspecified dollar amount as a lump sum. And so my question to them is, what dollar amount, if they offer you a dollar amount, what dollar amount should you take? That's the very first day I make that assignment in class. I put them in groups, and I say, answer the question, and I haven't taught you anything yet. Okay? But your 400 level math students, you've had a whole slew of math classes, and you know how to answer that question. And so I put them off on that. And so they get to do that. That's the first half of the semester. More than half. They're doing those kinds of projects, mathematical modeling, and various things. And then comes the project, the ones that I was talking about here, the service learning projects. And for those, the whole class is working together on one project. And that's how I do it. And I pick the project, the client comes in and tells them the question that they need answered, and then the students figure out how they're going to break themselves up, who's going to be the leader, how many teams do you need, you know, how do you want to divide up the work. They do the whole thing. And like I said, I butt in, but you know, really I try to, as hard as I can, to let them do it.
How many students is that?
It has fluctuated a bit over the years. It's been between, I'd say, 13 and 21. But 21 is rough. That was a tough semester. 15, 18 is my ideal numbers. And I'd really like them to be multiples of 3, but that's a hard one to fulfill.
The largest I've ever done was, I've had 3 semesters where I've had 30 students in a class that already had embedded service learning or as a research project or embedded undergraduate research in it. And 30 definitely is a challenge. And the only way that I've been able to be successful with that is much of what Jay was saying, that I really control the groups and I break apart the project in a way that makes some level of sense, or they have individual projects. But the ability, once it gets that large, the ability to have them individually write and for me to edit is impossible. So I think my experiences with theirs that around 15 really is ideal. But you know, just because you don't just give up because it's not ideal. Any other questions? I see a lot of students in here. How many of you are already participating in undergraduate research besides Ariel up here, who has done, what, 4 of the 5 types, right, Ariel? So she's, and we're hoping to get her paid one of these days soon. So how many people are thinking about now participating in undergraduate research? Okay. So definitely talk to your professors. Don't wait. In fact, I think Ariel didn't wait to get onto a research team. She asked. And so don't wait, and definitely talk to your professors, and because it's an incredibly worthwhile experience, even when it's crazy. Even when it's crazy.
Is there a class coming in here, Jeff? Is that what you're signaling?
Yes. Okay. All righty.
Maybe we need to.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody.